was thought to be extinct for 140 years. This is how scientists reacted to the discovery. Scientists have observed a black-necked pheasant for the first time in 140 years. The bird was found thanks to a hidden camera on Ferguson Island in Papua New Guinea. "It's like finding a unicorn," said John C. Mittermeier, one of the scientists who helped find the long-lost bird species. The black-necked pheasant is an endemic species of the pigeon family. The pheasant, elusive for 140 years, was recently discovered by a team of scientists from the American Society for the Protection of Birds. The newly taken photos and video are the first time scientists have documented the species since 1882. This large pheasant-like pigeon has been spotted on Ferguson Island in Papua New Guinea. This is the only place of its occurrence. Ornithologists know little about this species. According to researchers, their population on Ferguson Island is small and continues to decline. The team of scientists hope that the information they have gathered will help protect the birds. Black-necked pheasant. Amazing discovery of scientists. Researchers have been trying to find the black-necked pheasant for several years. In 2019, 3 scientists traveled to Ferguson Island, unsuccessfully searching for any trace of its presence. In September this year, a new scientific expedition managed to capture the individual in photos taken deep in the forests of the island. Numerous consultations with local residents were carried out to find the bird, and 20 hidden cameras were installed. The researchers learned about the presence of the black-necked pheasant from hunters living on the island, who described the characteristic noises made by the animal. Scientists photographed the bird just days before the planned end of the expedition. "When we collected camera traps, I figured there was a less than 1% chance of getting a picture of a black-necked pheasant," said Jordan Boersma, a researcher at Cornell University and co-lead of the expedition team. As he added, when he later looked through the photos, he was stunned by a photo of a bird walking right next to the camera. "This is the moment that conservationists and birdwatchers dream about," said John Mittermeier, one of the scientists leading the expedition, who works as director of the Lost Birds program at the American Bird Conservation Society. The interior of some church, lots of great chairs and lots of musical instruments. In the video below, situations with shoes happen to 2 women. The first one, on the left side of the frame, is about 40 years old, with dark, medium-length hair. She is wearing a black dress, covered with a pink blouse. On the legs, nude tights and black patent heels with cutouts along the length of the metatarsal and light inserts. The action begins in the 6th minute, when the woman takes off both shoes at once and puts her feet on them. Then, he moves his fingers slightly. At the beginning of the 9th minute, he puts the boot on his left foot completely and lifts his left foot over the right. The other foot remains in the previous position, where the toes are not inside the shoes. This takes at least 4 minutes, but it's impossible to tell exactly because the video has been trimmed. In the next scene, the right leg is hanging over the left and both shoes are already on the feet. After that, nothing interesting happens with this lady anymore. On the right side of the frame there is a teenage girl wearing a black dress with colorful patterns covered with an orange blouse. She wears nude tights and gray ballerinas. Already in the first minute, the left shoe partially loses contact with the foot. Then, from time to time, the girl changes the leg on which the entire weight of her body rests. According to this video, the right shoe loses contact with the foot slightly more often. It was thought to be extinct for 140 years. This is how scientists reacted to the discovery. Scientists have observed a black-necked pheasant for the first time in 140 years. The bird was found thanks to a hidden camera on Ferguson Island in Papua New Guinea. "It's like finding a unicorn," said John C. Mittermeier, one of the scientists who helped find the long-lost bird species. The black-necked pheasant is an endemic species of the pigeon family. The pheasant, elusive for 140 years, was recently discovered by a team of scientists from the American Society for the Protection of Birds. The newly taken photos and video are the first time scientists have documented the species since 1882. This large pheasant-like pigeon has been spotted on Ferguson Island in Papua New Guinea. This is the only place of its occurrence. Ornithologists know little about this species. According to researchers, their population on Ferguson Island is small and continues to decline. The team of scientists hope that the information they have gathered will help protect the birds. Black-necked pheasant. Amazing discovery of scientists. Researchers have been trying to find the black-necked pheasant for several years. In 2019, 3 scientists traveled to Ferguson Island, unsuccessfully searching for any trace of its presence. In September this year, a new scientific expedition managed to capture the individual in photos taken deep in the forests of the island. Numerous consultations with local residents were carried out to find the bird and 20 hidden cameras were installed. The researchers learned about the presence of the black-necked pheasant from hunters living on the island, who described the characteristic noises made by the animal. Scientists photographed the bird just days before the planned end of the expedition. "When we collected camera traps, I figured there was a less than 1% chance of getting a picture of a black-necked pheasant," said Jordan Boersma, a researcher at Cornell University and co-lead of the expedition team. As he added, when he later looked through the photos, he was stunned by a photo of a bird walking right next to the camera. "This is the moment that conservationists and birdwatchers dream about," said John Mittermeier, one of the scientists leading the expedition, who works as director of the Lost Birds program at the American Bird Conservation Society. Great news for balding people. This success of scientists may herald a breakthrough. Biotechnologists from Japan managed to obtain fully functioning mouse hair follicles in a laboratory culture. This is definitely good news for people struggling with baldness. The scientists' achievement may open the way to regenerative therapies for alopecia, as well as testing drugs and studying hair growth disorders. The hair follicles were grown by a team of researchers from Yokohama National University in Japan. The formation of hair follicles during the development of the body has been studied for several decades, but so far it has not been possible to reproduce it in artificial conditions. Recently, however, there have been further successes in the creation of the so-called organoids, miniature models of various organs. Such structures serve for disease research, potential therapies, and organ development. Organoids have become a promising tool for understanding the mechanism of hair follicle formation in vitro, explains Professor Tatsuto Kageyama, author of the paper published in the journal Science Advances. The researchers used two types of mouse embryonic stem cells placed on a special medium to control their growth. Almost 100% hair follicles with hair shafts developed from them. Scientists added to them a substance that stimulates the development of pigment-forming cells, melanocytes, which gave the hair roots their color. In the next step, they implanted the cultured follicles into the skin of mice, obtaining successive cycles of hair growth. Making it over time can bring measurable benefits to many people. Researchers explain that the follicles they created will allow for a better study of drugs that stimulate hair growth, and even the regeneration of lost follicles in addition. The knowledge gained will help in research on the development of other organs. The Japanese team is already announcing the next key step. In the next stage, we want to use human cells and work on drugs and methods in the field of regenerative medicine, says Professor Junji Fukuda, one of the researchers. The interior of a very large hall, with many benches and chairs, and a stage. On the right side of the frame, a woman, about 25 years old, wearing a green blouse, black pants and black, probably suede, platform heels set on probably bare feet. Clearly, the dominant situation here is that the right foot is shoeless, though not completely. This usually happens when the right leg is crossed over the left. The shoe is in the air. Only at the end of the film are both feet on the floor, and then only the right foot is removed from the shoe. The breakthrough moment happens at the end of the first minute, when the right foot is lifted very high and the woman shakes something off the tip of her shoe with her left hand. Great news for balding people. This success of scientists may herald a breakthrough. Biotechnologists from Japan managed to obtain fully functioning mouse hair follicles in a laboratory culture. This is definitely good news for people struggling with baldness. The scientists' achievement may open the way to regenerative therapies for alopecia, as well as testing drugs and studying hair growth disorders. The hair follicles were grown by a team of researchers from Yokohama National University in Japan. The formation of hair follicles during the development of the body has been studied for several decades, but so far it has not been possible to reproduce it in artificial conditions. Recently, however, there have been further successes in the creation of the so-called organoids, miniature models of various organs. Such structures serve for disease research, potential therapies, and organ development. Organoids have become a promising tool for understanding the mechanism of hair follicle formation in vitro, explains Professor Tatsuto Kageyama. author of the paper published in the journal Science Advances. The researchers used 2 types of mouse embryonic stem cells placed on a special medium to control their growth. Almost 100% hair follicles with hair shafts developed from them. Scientists added to them a substance that stimulates the development of pigment-forming cells, melanocytes, which gave the hair roots their color. In the next step, they implanted the cultured follicles into the skin of mice, obtaining successive cycles of hair growth. Making it over time can bring measurable benefits to many people. Researchers explain that the follicles they created will allow for a better study of drugs that stimulate hair growth, and even the regeneration of lost follicles in addition. The knowledge gained will help in research on the development of other organs. The Japanese team is already announcing the next key step. In the next stage, we want to use human cells and work on drugs and methods in the field of regenerative medicine, says Professor Junji Fukuda, one of the researchers. SpaceX sends more Starlinks into orbit. The new series has problems. SpaceX continues to expand its Starlink satellite network. In March, it made 2 more rocket launches, sending over 100 new ships. However, not everything goes according to plan. The first batch of new much larger Starlink satellites shipped in February is malfunctioning. SpaceX is building a huge network of telecommunications satellites in low Earth orbit. The Starlink system provides broadband access to the Internet, and its main customers are people and organizations located in places where terrestrial services are unavailable or very unreliable. The Starlink system is already used by over 1 million users on all continents of the world. Starlink is even present at a research station in Antarctica. In addition to fixed subscribers, the network is entering the market of mobile services in the aviation sector. Starlink is not only used commercially, the system helps during natural disasters. And Ukraine also uses its services to defend its territory against Russian aggression. In March, 2 more orbital missions were carried out to expand the network. On March 17, 2023, a Falcon 9 rocket with another set of Starlink satellites was launched from the Vandenberg Cosmodrome on the west coast of the USA. In the Starlink 2-8 mission, it sent another 52 network satellites. The flight was successful in all phases, and after about 15 minutes all ships safely left the upper stage of the rocket in the initial orbit. From here, after the test phase, they will go to the target orbits of Shell number 2 of the system after the test phase. The mission used a used lower stage of the Falcon 9 rocket with the designation B1071, for which it was already the 8th flight. Previously, this element successfully accelerated missions NROL-87, NROL-85, Sarah 1, Starlink 3-2, Starlink 4-29, SWAT and Starlink 2-6. Also after this launch, the stage returned to Earth and landed under its own propulsion on the autonomous barge OCISLY in the Pacific Ocean. In the Starlink 2-8 flight, V1.5 satellites were sent. This is the most popular version of Starlink satellites to date. Each of the V1.5 ships has a mass of approximately 300 kilograms and has antennas for communication in the Ka and Ku bands, as well as lasers and receiving systems for inter-satellite laser communication. The satellites are equipped with ion propulsion, Krypton-powered Hall thrusters, with which they maneuver and reach their target orbits. Exactly 1 week later, on March 24, another Starlink mission launched from the Cape Canaveral spaceport on the east coast of the United States. Starlink Flight 5-5 sent 56 satellites to Shell number 5. This shell is for the Starlink second-generation network. However, in the case of this flight, satellites of the V1.5 version were sent, the same ones that occupy the previous generation shells No. 1-4. The mission was a complete success. About an hour after launch, all satellites were launched simultaneously into the initial low Earth orbit. The second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket was used in the rocket flight. For the element with the number B1067, it was already the 10th space mission. Previously, a copy was used to launch missions: crew flights to ISS Crew 3 and Crew 4, cargo flights to the ISS CRS-22 and CRS-25, Turksat 5B, Hotbird 13G, Starlink 4-34 and Starlink 5-2, O3 BM Power 1 and 2, after the work was done. The stage detached from the upper stage of the rocket and returned to Earth for the 10th time, landing on the ASOG autonomous barge in the Atlantic Ocean. The Starlink 5-5 mission sent 56 satellites to Shell number 5. This is the orbital shell, for which the first launch was carried out in December 2022. Ultimately, it is to be filled with second-generation Starlink satellites, much larger, many times more capacious than the V1.5 version. In the future, Starlink V2 satellites are to be launched on the Starship Super Heavy rocket system developed by SpaceX. However, in this mission, as in the 4 previous ones, the well-known V1.5 satellites flew to this shell. SpaceX maintains a very high rate of launches of its orbital rockets. A significant part of these flights, 10 out of 20, are missions of the Starlink megaconstellation she is building. A total of over 4,100 system satellites have already been launched into orbit. Most of them went to first-generation shells numbered 1 to 4. In 2021, the company completed the construction of the first orbital shell number 1, and in 2022 it also practically completed the filling of shell number 4. Currently, shells number 2 and No. 3 are being filled with higher inclination orbits that improve network coverage at higher latitudes. In December 2022, the expansion of shells number 5 and number 6 began, which will receive over 3,000 satellites. At the end of February 2023, SpaceX flew the first Starlink 6-1 mission with Starlink V2 mini satellites, a reduced version of the Starlink V2 satellite, adapted to be carried on a Falcon 9 rocket. Ultimately, the Starlink V2 satellites will fill shells number 5 and No. 6. Each of the V2 satellites weighs 800 kilograms and has 4 times the telecommunication capacity compared to V1.5. These satellites are also much larger, have a pair of solar panel wings and new ion engines powered by argon, not krypton like their predecessors. The Starlink 6-1 mission successfully placed the V2 mini satellites into their initial orbit, but most of them began to lose altitude due to the drag of Earth's residual atmosphere instead of climbing to their target positions. Elon Musk confirmed on Twitter that some of the new satellites are experiencing problems and some will be intentionally deorbited, and some will be additionally tested before reaching their final position. According to the NASA Spaceflight Portal, the problems concern various systems: power, communication and orientation control. Interestingly, there was no information about the malfunctioning of the ion engines, which are completely new, powered by a new gas. Problems with the Starlink V2 mini satellites should not significantly reduce the pace of launches with Starlink satellites. Another mission with V1.5 satellites is planned for the end of March. SpaceX also hopes to send another set of V2 mini satellites. The interior is unglazed with a graphite floor and light walls. There are several benches and chairs and a roll-up screen. A middle-aged woman, about 40 to 45 years old, wearing a red t-shirt, a black jacket over it and a black skirt. On the legs, probably medium translucent flesh-colored tights, and cream ballerinas on them. The right shoe loses contact with the foot more often, though not completely. However, both are fancifully lowered and raised. Various interesting positions are performed, be it legs crossed or feet lowered on the floor. Scientists have printed a cheesecake. 3D printing technology could revolutionize the kitchen. Scientists showing its potential in this field printed cheesecake. They acknowledged that food printing could provide greater personalization of food, improve food safety and allow users to more easily control the nutritional content of meals. 3D printing technology is used for many things. With its help, houses, cross-species, implants are created, doctors implanted a woman's ear printed with her own cells, and even organs, such as a heart. Now scientists from Columbia University and Pace University have used this technology to print a cheesecake. Although the first attempts did not go well, over time, the scientists refined the recipe and created a cake that resembles the work of a cook. Will ovens, pans, samovars or microwave ovens become a thing of the past? Maybe. This will probably happen thanks to 3D printers, but it will not happen in the near future. Scientists in New York have attempted to print a cheesecake. It worked, but in terms of taste, it didn't turn out the best. The first 3D printers for food printing were adapted quite a long time ago. Already in 2005, the first experiments were carried out in the laboratory of Hoda Lipson at Columbia University. So far, this technology has been limited to creating 2-ingredient dishes, which was quite a limitation. In the new research, Jonathan Blutinger's team designed a special 3D printing system capable of constructing meals from 7 different ingredients by equipping a 3D printer with nozzles designed to extrude selected ingredients and programming the printer to dispense them into the prepared dishes. They also equipped the equipment with a laser that allows for the thermal processing of ingredients. For the cheesecake that took 30 minutes to print, the researchers used cracker paste, peanut butter, strawberry jam, Nutella, banana puree, cherry sprinkles and frosting. The results of the first attempts were not satisfactory. However, over time, scientists refined the recipe and after 5 failed attempts, a cheesecake was created that resembled a real cheesecake. How did it taste? It definitely tasted like something I'd never tasted before. It was even good, but it's not a conventional mix. We are not Michelin chefs, said Blutinger, the lead author of the publication. The most successful recipe used crackers as the base ingredient for each cake layer. Peanut butter and Nutella worked best as support layers that created pockets for the softer ingredients. Banana puree and jam. In this way, the dough acquired a rigid structure and did not collapse. Cheesecake is the best thing we can present right now, but our printer can do so much more. We can print chicken, beef, vegetables and cheese. Anything that can be turned into a paste, liquid or powder, Blutinger said. Blutinger believes that printed food is a natural consequence of the development of this technology and its confrontation with the analog world of cookers, steamers and pans. Potentially, such equipment could be used almost anywhere, from food producers to restaurants and homes. 3D printers can be the next step in automation, freeing us from the need to prepare dishes. Blutinger also sees the technology as a good way to track calories and precisely control nutrients, helping to prepare food for people on a variety of diets. And while the authors acknowledge that printer food should be classified as highly processed food, which many studies have shown to be fatal to health, they also argue that their approach to cooking can help solve this problem, because it is possible to precisely calibrate the content of nutrients and calories in food. We have a huge problem with the low nutritional value of processed foods. 3D food printing will still mean processed food. But perhaps the positive news for some people is that it will allow for better control and tailoring of nutrition to specific needs, said Kristen Cooper of Pace University Nutrition and Dietetics. However, this technology is still in its infancy. It still has a long way to go to market. Since 3D food printing is still an emerging technology, it needs an ecosystem of supporting industries, such as food cartridge manufacturers or even recipe writers for this type of device, Blutinger pointed out.
Africa is slowly cracking. Scientists predict the formation of a new ocean. We are well aware that the continents on Earth are constantly moving, which is drastically manifested by, for example, earthquakes. Certainly, after hundreds of millions of years, it would be difficult for us to recognize the arrangement of continents on our planet. And these changes are happening even now. This applies, for example, to Africa, which, as researchers point out, is slowly falling apart. Scientists say that Africa is splitting in two, which will eventually lead to the formation of a new ocean. Although this process will take millions of years, scientists argue, it will separate what is now Somalia, parts of Kenya, Ethiopia and Tanzania from the rest of the continent. Observing the world around us and the continents existing on Earth, we should keep in mind that what we see, what the maps we use represent, is relatively new in relation to the entire time of the Earth's existence and has existed for a relatively short time. The Earth's surface is constantly changing. Only the human eye cannot see it directly, because it happens relatively slowly. Such processes take millions of years. It is not without reason that the Earth's continents are sometimes compared to pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Just look at their shape. For example, the west coast of Africa and the east coast of South America seem to go together very well. And this is due to the fact that millions of years ago they actually met in this very place. However, they separated about 138 million years ago. In the context of the movement of continents on Earth, something significant is already happening to Africa, which will irreversibly change its shape and appearance. Of great importance here is the Great Rift Valley, a tectonic trench that is part of the Great African Rift Valley. It runs through many countries, such as Ethiopia, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, Tanzania, Malawi and Mozambique. In 2018, the world circulated footage and photos showing a huge crack that occurred in Kenya. Already then there were voices that Africa was falling apart before our eyes. However, while this event was in fact related to the aforementioned rift system, a rift is a type of tectonic trench extending over long distances. It cannot be unequivocally considered as tangible evidence of the division of Africa. However, it is estimated that this rift has been involved in processes taking place in Africa for about 25 million years. On the other hand, tectonic movements taking place along the East African system cause the African plate to gradually split in two, and the Somali and Nubian plates gradually begin to move away from each other. It's a very slow process. The movement happens at the speed of millimeters per year. However, this means that Africa will be torn in two over the next millions of years, between which a new ocean will probably form. It is estimated that these changes will take a more drastic form in about 5 to 10 million years. And it is during this period that a new body of water will most likely form. Research of Chernobyl dogs. Scientists have found genetic differences. Scientists studying the genomes of feral dogs living in the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant have shown that there are significant genetic differences between two groups of quadrupeds living in different areas of the zone. Scientists hope that the knowledge gained in this way will contribute to a better understanding of the impact of long-term exposure to radiation on human genetics and health. The accident of the fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986 caused the largest release of radioactive material into the environment in history. The impact of acute exposure to high doses of radiation was severe for the environment. However, more than 3 decades after the accident, Chernobyl has become a sanctuary for wild animals, which do not mind radiation, but the absence of human presence seems to favor them. A diverse range of endangered species, including bears, wolves and lynxes, find shelter here today. Ionizing radiation can damage the genetic material of living organisms and generate unwanted mutations. One of the most interesting research topics in the Chernobyl zone is an attempt to detect whether there are species that have adapted to live in such an environment. As with other pollutants, ionizing radiation can be a very strong selective factor, favoring organisms with mechanisms that increase their adaptability in areas contaminated with radioactive substances. So far, there have been no population genetic studies of large mammals inhabiting the exclusion zone. A group of scientists looked at the feral dogs, of which there are now about 800 in the zone. Although several days after the accident, rescue teams were looking for quadrupeds in order to eliminate them. At that time, it was argued that the dogs were certainly irradiated and posed a threat. After the Chernobyl explosion in 1986, as many as 300,000 people died. People were forced to leave their place of residence. Later, the so-called an exclusion zone that extends to a radius of 30 kilometers from the site of the destroyed reactor. This zone is uninhabitable. This state of affairs is largely due to the level of radiation and contamination of water and soil. After the disaster, various attempts were made to neutralize the threat chemically, but they did not bring the intended results. All this creates an extremely toxic conglomerate in which it is difficult to survive. Yet there are animals that do. Among them are dogs. One group of which lives in the vicinity of the reactor itself, and the other in Chernobyl, about 15 kilometers away. Of course, the question arises as to what effect being in such an environment has on the genetic material. An attempt to study the genome of dogs living there has been made before. It was then noticed that the two groups mentioned above were different from each other. This time, it was possible to obtain as many as 4 times more samples for genetic research, which allowed for an even more thorough analysis of the genomes living in the dog exclusion zone. The researchers identified as many as 391 regions in the canine genomes that differed between dogs living in these two locations. Interestingly, some of them point to genes related to DNA repair processes in dogs exposed to such unfavorable conditions. It will now be crucial to understand how the genetic differences between these groups developed in the first place. Are we dealing here only with genetic drift? Or are these changes a response to the characteristics of the environment in which they live? By finding the answer to this question, we will be much closer to understanding how these dogs managed to survive there in the first place. It will also be possible to better understand how exposure to such harsh conditions can affect other living beings, including, of course, humans. Thank you.